Mike Murdock, Father's Day, Part 2. Tonight's Saturday night, as you know. And my father went to be with the Lord several years ago at 99 years old. And I said earlier, he has never spent one day in a hospital. What are my mistakes with my father? Not asking enough questions. Not asking him about every decision I made. I look back now and think, what was wrong with me? Some people have stupid moments in their life. I have stupid years in my life, months. Maybe that's why I have such an obsession for wisdom, because I didn't have enough sense to pursue it. I remember driving around the Wisdom Center 20 years ago or so and said, Daddy, what do you think? Should I buy this for our ministry? And we prayed the Spirit, held each other's hand, prayed a lot, and drove several times around it. And he would never say a total yes or no to anything. He would say, well, you sure want to know the mind of the Lord. Best advice I ever received was from my father, and that's just know the voice of the Spirit. That's what he said all the time. Just know the voice of the Spirit. When I went through a divorce at 33, well, in a few years, I'm going crazy. Feel like I've got to have a wife. I can't live without a woman in my world. And he would say that over and over, just know the voice of the Spirit. One day he was flying with me on one of my jets. We was flying 520 miles an hour up to New York. And I had a bed for him, all made out for him, everything he wanted. There's nothing I wouldn't do for my mother and dad. Buy cars, house, whatever I had was theirs first. Two things I want to put in this little video. He said, son, this jet, this is a long ways from the old red horse I started off in the ministry with. And I said, Daddy, and I bought it cash, Daddy. I bought it cash. I do everything cash. I wouldn't dream of borrowed money. If I don't have money, I'm not ready for it. I would never borrow money anywhere, anytime, anybody. And I said, Daddy, I bought it cash. He said, huh? That was always his highest level of enthusiasm, saying, huh? Huh. He never said anything about any songs I ever wrote. He never said anything about a book I wrote. One time, a little 32 page, I was just determined he'd read a book. He glanced through and says, all this is true. That's what he said, all this is true. But he was not a person who complimented anybody, wasn't in him. His father, my grandfather, never did affirm him in any way, so that wasn't in him. But we had 2 or 3 run-ins. Your father knows far more than you do. Your father can anticipate the problems you're going to have. And I'll never forget that day on the plane. And the Lord spoke to me. He said, what if I told you I gave you this plane so you could fly him around everywhere? I said, what? And the Holy Spirit says, what if I told you I gave you this jet so you could bring your father around with you everywhere you went? Well, I thought he gave me the jet because he loved me. But the Lord said that and whispered that to my heart. I made a statement one time publicly that I'd never had a financial conversation with my father. He never told me 2-3 sentences about money. Never. And then the Lord reminded me, said, remember when he's told you, just know the voice of the Spirit. Just know the voice of the Spirit. And I realized where some prosperity had happened. It was in Daystar, 4:30 in the afternoon, Wednesday. And the Lord told me something about seed sowing for me to do, that I'd never done. And I listened to the voice of the Lord, and 4 months later, I had more finances in every single, by the way, I wasn't even preaching during that time at all. I'd had heart problems. In every single bank account that I had more finances than I'd ever had, and I hadn't preached, hadn't received one single honorarium from a single church. But in prayer, God had spoken to me one morning, decisions decide wealth, while I was in prayer. The average person doesn't pray except when they're in trouble. But that day when I did what the Holy Spirit said, I did that because Daddy said, just know the voice of the Spirit. Just know the voice of the Spirit. And I realized that the 3 jets that I bought cash, and not one partner's ever given me a single dollar to buy a plane. Not one. I'd go to 4 cities and 4 states in one day. I went all over the United States, just soaked it. But everything I did with those jets was because of a sentence my daddy told me. Just know the voice of the Spirit. So I really couldn't say anymore. I couldn't tell anybody that Daddy had never talked to me about money, because when he said that, he covered my money problems. He covered that. He was a strong disciplinarian. And one day I pulled off the belt at a conference and showed how Daddy beat me. He did. He was very strong about whippings with a belt. Very strong. He didn't know when to quit. And I was sharing that publicly, and he sat there at the table, staring down at the table, and he just stared at the table when I told about him whipping me. And the Lord spoke to me after service and said, why did you tell the people about how he beat you, whipped you? Says you've affected his credibility. Said they don't know all the other times he prayed with you and all the things he did for you, which was true. He's the one that prayed the healing prayer when I was 2.5 and over 600 worms crawled out of my mouth in one day and my body. He's the intercessor who got me healed. I don't think I knew how to really value a father. In fact, I know I didn't. I loved him, valued him, honored him, respected him, admired his prayer life. But in this honoring Father's Day, I have 2 or 3 spiritual sons that are showing me how to love a father. I didn't know how. Fathers decide what sons believe. Many of the people in prison have Christian mothers, but they had no Christian father. That's why they're in prison. Talk to you later. Mike Murdock.